Hey traders, welcome to the pullback strategy. In this lesson, you'll be learning the rules associated with the pullback strategy and everything you'll need in order to test and trade this strategy when it comes to the rules involved. Now, the pullback strategy is a trend continuation strategy that consists of two separate entries. In the beginning of this video, we're going to be taking a look at only one of those, which is entry number one. Entry number one of the pullback strategy is meant to capture a highly volatile market with small pullbacks in anticipation for trend continuation. Now, this strategy is completely rules-based, meaning the 5 rules you see on your screen must happen every single time we place a trade, and that's what makes this type of trading so powerful. With these rules in place, you can even write these down, and I would suggest taking notes throughout this section of the course. Write down all of these rules, put them beside your trading desk, and you can check them off each and every time you place a trade to make sure you're following the rules of the trading plan correctly. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the rules for the pullback strategy entry number one. We have a lot of information to go over in this video. Again, make sure that you are taking notes. So diving right into it. Rule number one for entry number one is that we're looking for a market below the 50 EMA. If you remember from the previous section, one of the indicators we talked about using is the 50 EMA. You probably already have it posted on your chart. If you don't, go ahead and do so. What we will need is to see a market trading below that 50 EMA. And initially, we need a break below that 50 EMA, just like we get right here. So we have a market breaking below and trading below the 50-day exponential moving average, and that is our rule number one that must be met for the pullback strategy entry reason number one. So as soon as we get that break below, we start to look for rule number two, which is right down here. Rule number two is initially the market must make a new lower low. If we look back here, you can see our previous low, price action made, and obviously this move down right here does break below this previous low. So we have rule number one met. We can check that off. The market is below the 50 EMA. We have rule number two met. We can check that off because we did break into a new lower low considering the placement of our previous low. What's rule number three? Rule number three is we have to wait for at least a 2-candle opposite color pullback from the swing low. So as we push down, we created this swing low before we got a pullback. As soon as this swing low is created, we're waiting for 2 opposite color candles. This is a bearish version of this trade. We're looking at short entries because we're below the 50 EMA. That makes this a bearish trade. So we would need 2 opposite color pullback candles. These 2 candles need to be green. So as soon as we get those 2 green candles, then we have rule number 3 met. As soon as we get these 2 color changing pullback candles after the creation of our swing low, then we have rule number 3 met. So far, what do we have? We have a market that pushed under and is trading under the 50 EMA. We have a market that created a new lower low, and we have a 2-candle pullback from that swing low with these 2 green candles. So we've checked off all 3 of those rules. The next rule we're going to be taking a look at is rule number 4. In rule number 4, we're just waiting on that advanced engulfing entry pattern that we talked about in the basic section of the course. If you don't remember that, go ahead and go back to the candlestick entry patterns video of the basic section. We're not going to go over that too much, but as you can see here, we do have our advanced entry pattern, which was a 1 lower high, 2 higher high, followed by an engulfing candle. So we have that 1, 2, 3 engulfing candle move right there, giving us our advanced engulfing entry reason. That checks off rule number 4 as long as it happens below the 50 EMA. Does this advanced engulfing entry happen below the 50 EMA? Of course it does. Our 50 EMA is right here. That entry reason happens below the 50 EMA. Now, the 5th and final rule after we have checked off all 4 of those is that the entry candle cannot close below the body of the swing low candle. Let's talk about that for a second. So, as stated, we have this push down to our what? Our swing low right here. We created that new swing low before the push up of 2 candles. So the swing low, before the push up of at least 2 candles that we see, that's where we need to draw a line, is at the body of that swing low. So as soon as we got that line on the body of that swing low, our entry candle right here cannot close below that swing low. If that happens, the trade is not valid, but as long as our entry candle closes above this swing low, then we have a valid entry. All right, let's go through every rule one more time. just to make sure you're completely grasping this strategy. And after this, we'll go through a bullish entry. Then we'll talk about the rules for entry reason number 2, and then we'll dive into stop loss and target placement for this strategy. But for now, let's just concentrate on entry reason number 1. And this, of course, is a bearish trade. What do we need to see? Market trading below the 50 EMA, creating a new lower low in trend. We have rule number 1 and 2 met. Then we need at least a 2 candle pullback, opposite of the underlying trend, which is down, meaning we need 2 green candles at least. We can have more than 2, but no less than 2. That rule has been met. Next up, we're waiting for our advanced entry pattern below the 50 EMA. Is that rule met? Yes, it is. And finally, as long as the entry candle did not close below the body of the previous swing low before the 2 candle pullback, then this is a valid entry. Is that the case here? Yes, it is. We can check that off. We now have a valid entry for rule number 1, for entry number 1 here on the pullback strategy. So that's what we're looking at, guys. That's going to be the rules for our pullback strategy for entry number 1. Go ahead and write all of these down. Keep them beside your desk, as I said, so that you can check them off one by one. And hopefully you're already starting to see how powerful it can be to have a rules-based strategy. Look at how specific we're being with each of these rules. It's leaving no room for error, meaning every single time we place a trade, as long as we check off all 5 of these boxes, all 5 of these rules here, then we know we're following our trading plan when it comes to the pullback strategy, entry reason number 1. And for entry reason number 1, our entries continue to stay valid as long as this market continues in trend. What do I mean by that? As this market pushes down, we can check off the exact same rules. So looking here at number 1, is this market still below the 50 EMA? Yes. Looking at number 2, did we break into a new low? Well, this was our previous swing low, and this is the low now, so obviously we have a lower low. Waiting on rule number 3. Do we have more than a 2 candle green pullback from this swing low? Yes, we have 1, 2, 3 candle pullback. So we have 1, 2, and rule number 3 all accounted for. Rule number 4, do we get an advanced entry reason below our 50 EMA? If I take this off, if we just don't pay attention to that or that, let's see if you can spot that advanced entry. Remember, if we have a swing high that ends up being an engulfing candle, then that is one of our advanced entry techniques. And here we do. We have that 1, 2, 3 met, meaning market's below the 50. The market is creating new lower lows with this impulsive move down, breaking into trend continuation to the downside. We waited on more than a 2 candle pullback. We have 3 green candles pulling back from our swing low here. Rule number 4, we get that advanced engulfing entry with a swing high engulfing pattern. And rule number 5, this close of the swing high engulfing pattern is above our previous swing low, the body of this previous swing low. So we can check that rule off as well, and this would be a valid entry number 1 for the pullback strategy as well. And as long as this market continues in trend continuation pushing down, we would continue to look for that entry reason. Now let's go ahead and move on now to a bullish version of this entry reason number 1 for the pullback strategy, and then we'll move on to the next video in this section of the course and take a look at entry reason number 2 for the pullback strategy. Okay guys, so here's a bullish example of that entry reason number 1 for the pullback strategy. The first question we have to ask ourselves, did we break above the 50 EMA and is price trading above that level? The answer to that question is obviously yes, we did do that. The next question we have to ask ourselves after checking that off is, did the market make a new higher high? And I actually need to change that. Sorry about that, guys. And the answer to that question, of course, is yes as well. We did break above the 50 EMA and we made a new higher high than the previous high. The next question we have to ask ourselves is, did we get a 2 candle pullback? The answer to that is yes. The next question, did we get a valid advanced engulfing entry? Well, if you're paying attention right here, we did not get an advanced engulfing candle entry pattern like we've studied in the previous lessons. So what does that mean? Well, that means that this would not be a trade. But what we can look for even after this is the same set of rules. So we've had that. We've had everything we need in order to classify this as being in the correct condition. We get this pullback. Now we need to start checking things off again. Are we still above the 50 EMA? The answer to that is yes, we are still above this 50 EMA. Do we break into a new higher high? The answer to that, also yes. This high is higher than the previous high. So we can check that off as well. Now, do we get the at least 2 candle pullback from this high? If we look down through here, we definitely have more than 2 red candles pulling back. So we can check that off. do we get an advanced engulfing entry reason above, this should be changed as well, sorry guys, above the 50 EMA? Well, let's look and see. We have this pullback, and if we take off these two candles completely, what do you guys see? We have our 1, 2, 3 engulfing candle setup for our advanced entry reason. So the answer to that is yes. We now have a market above the 50 that's making new highs, that had more than a 2 candle pullback, and that gave us an advanced engulfing entry. The last question we have to ask ourselves is, does the close of our entry candle right here go above the body of the previous swing high right here? Obviously the answer to that question is no, so we can check off rule number 5, and we have a valid entry reason number 1 for the pullback strategy in the bullish direction. So again guys, going over that one more time, we're looking at the market making new highs above our 50 EMA. We're above the 50 EMA. We check that off. We're making new highs. We check that off. We're waiting on a 2 candle pullback. Obviously, we get more than a 2 candle pullback here. We're waiting for a valid advanced engulfing entry. We get that right here. And we want to make sure the close of that valid engulfing entry is not above the bodies of the previous swing high. We get that, making this a valid entry number 1 on the pullback strategy. So the next video we're going to take a look at is entry number 2 for the pullback strategy, which is very similar to entry number 1, and then we'll dive into targets and stops. So let's go ahead and move on to the next video, take a look at that, take some notes on that video as well, and I'll see you guys in that lesson.